Your blood sugar is not the problem most people think it is. The problem is not that your pancreas is broken. It is not that you lack willpower at dinner. And it is almost certainly not that you need a continuous glucose monitor strapped to your arm, or a 150 a month supplement stack to fix it. The problem is simpler than that, and older than that. In a small village called Ogimi, in the northern hills of Okinawa, Japan, a place researchers have tracked for nearly 50 years, the elders who lived past 100 had something in common that had nothing to do with genetics. They ate two things almost every single day, and they stopped eating before they were full. That was it. No pharmaceuticals, no protocols, no products. What I am going to show you today is what those two foods do inside your body, at the cellular level, and what actually happens to your blood sugar when you eat this way for 30 days. Not what the marketing promises, what the research shows. And there is one piece of this I have saved for the end that is not about food at all. It is about a 7-second behavior before every meal that the Okinawans practiced for centuries without knowing they were activating one of the most powerful longevity genes ever identified. I want to make sure you have that before you go. You have probably noticed something you do not quite have a name for yet. That heaviness that settles in around 2 in the afternoon, that drop. You are not sick, you are not tired in the way sleep fixes, but something slows, something dims, and you reach for coffee, or something sweet without really deciding to. It happens most days. You have started to wonder whether this is just what 65 feels like. It is not. That is a postprandial glucose curve, and it is fixable. What most people do when they discover this is reach for berberine capsules, or apple cider vinegar gummies, or a CGM to track numbers that then require other products to manage. As of 2023, Medicare alone spent $35.8 billion on just 10 diabetes drugs, a 364% increase from 2019, according to the HHS Office of Inspector General. $35 billion, and the rates kept climbing. Over 28% of Americans aged 65 and older now have diabetes. The Okinawans were not spending anything, they were eating lunch. The first food is bitter melon, Goya in Japanese, Momordica carantia in the research literature. If you have never encountered it, it looks like a pale green cucumber that decided to go in a completely different direction. Deeply ridged, almost warty on the outside, and intensely, almost aggressively bitter inside. That bitterness is not a flaw, it is the mechanism. Bitter melon contains 3 compounds the research has focused on closely: charentin, polypeptide P, and vicine. Charentin activates something called AMPK, AMP-activated protein kinase, which is essentially the switch your muscle cells use to pull glucose out of your bloodstream without requiring insulin to do it. Polypeptide P works differently. It is a physical insulin mimetic. It binds directly to insulin receptors in the way insulin itself does. In a 2013 literature review published in the Asian Pacific Journal of Tropical Biomedicine, B. Joseph and D. Gini documented that charentin was more effective at lowering blood sugar than tolbutamide, an oral hypoglycemic pharmaceutical that was once a standard of care. More effective, not comparable, more effective. Now, you have probably seen bitter melon extract capsules, bitter melon powder, bitter melon gummies. You need to know something about those. The active compounds in bitter melon work inside a food matrix, dense insoluble fiber, water, the physical architecture of the whole vegetable, that slows how quickly your stomach empties and prevents the glucose from the rest of your meal from spiking at all. The capsule has no fiber, the capsule has no matrix. In 2000, the HOPE trial, Heart Outcomes, Prevention Evaluation, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, 9,341 high-risk patients, found that isolated antioxidant supplements provided no meaningful benefit in preventing cardiovascular or diabetic complications. The isolation is the problem. The whole food is the delivery system. Think of it like a gate. The fiber is the gate. The compounds are only as useful as the speed at which they are released. The traditional preparation is Goya champuru. Here is exactly how it is made. Cut one medium bitter melon in half lengthwise. Scoop out the white pith and seeds with a spoon. That is where most of the extreme bitterness lives. Slice thinly into half moons. Toss the slices with 1 teaspoon of salt and let them sit for 10 minutes. The salt draws out the harshest bitterness. Rinse thoroughly, squeeze dry. Stir fry in 1 tablespoon of cooking oil. Add half a block of cubed firm tofu and 2 beaten eggs. A splash of soy sauce to finish. The tofu and egg are not just traditional, they are functional. Protein and fat slow gastric emptying even further, working synergistically with the fiber in the Goya to flatten the glucose curve of everything else you eat with it. About half a cup of cooked bitter melon per serving. That is the dose the research works from. The most common mistake is drowning it in sweet soy glaze or teriyaki sauce to cover the bitterness. That is not an adaptation. That is the opposite of the point. In your first week, days 3 through 7, you will notice 2 things. First, your digestion will move more actively. The fiber is doing its work. Second, that 2 calories PM drop will begin to flatten, not disappear entirely, not yet. But the cliff becomes a slope. That is your postprandial curve beginning to change. That stiffness in the afternoon, that drop, you now know what it is and where it comes from. What I am about to tell you is the second half of this, and it is the part that surprises people who already know about bitter melon. The second food is something you may already recognize, but what you probably do not know is that it was once the entire diet. Before 1950, traditional Okinawans got approximately 60% of their daily calories from a single food. Not rice, not fish. A purple sweet potato called Beni Imo, Ipamoya batatas, with a deep violet flesh that comes from compounds called anthocyanins, specifically peonidin and cyanidin. Here is what anthocyanins do, that white or orange sweet potato does not do. They inhibit alpha-glucosidase, the enzyme in your gut that breaks complex carbohydrates into simple sugars. When that enzyme is inhibited, digestion of starch slows. The glucose release flattens. The spike that would otherwise come from eating a starchy food is, in the presence of these anthocyanins, substantially reduced. Beni Imo also contains a protein called sporamin. Sporamin is a trypsin inhibitor. That is its primary job, but it is also one of the most potent antioxidants identified in any root vegetable. Its specific role is protecting pancreatic beta cells from oxidative stress. The beta cells are the cells that produce insulin. When they are damaged by chronic high blood sugar, by oxidative stress, by years of a diet that forces them to overproduce, your insulin response deteriorates. Sporamin protects the system upstream. The glycemic index of Beni Imo is approximately 55. A standard russet potato comes in around 85. That gap is the anthocyanin mechanism made visible in a number. A week's supply of Goya, firm tofu, eggs and purple sweet potatoes costs roughly $10 to $15 at an Asian market. H Mart carries Goya, 99 Ranch as well. Purple sweet potatoes are often labeled Okinawan sweet potato or Stokes purple at specialty grocers. The Western wellness industry has turned these foods into powders, pills, and gummy supplements. Beni Imo powder, bitter melon extract, anthocyanin capsules. Wilcox et al., writing in the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences in 2007, analyzed the traditional Okinawan diet at a population level and found that the benefit was inseparable from the food matrix, the fiber, the water content, the physical architecture of whole food that regulates gastric emptying. Refining Beni Imo into powder destroys that architecture. You are paying for the name without the mechanism. We extract, they ate, we isolate, they prepared. We spend $35 billion. They spent nothing. We monitor our numbers with technology. They did not know their numbers, and they did not need to. I told you I was saving something for the end. Here it is. In 2012, Wilcox et al., published in Reviews in Endocrine and Metabolic Disorders, confirmed something the Okinawa Centenarian Study had been tracking since 1976 across more than 1,000 centenarians, that the siblings of Okinawan centenarians had up to a 5.43-fold higher likelihood of reaching age 90, largely because of preserved insulin signaling. Preserved, not restored, not medically managed, preserved from the beginning through how they ate. Part of how they ate was a phrase spoken before every meal for centuries. Hara hachibu. It means eat until you are 8 parts full, 80%, not a portion control container, not a gastric balloon, not a GLP-1 injection. 7 words before a meal. The science behind it is not simple. Eating slowly, pausing, allowing the stomach's stretch receptors to communicate with the vagus nerve before you reach the physical sensation of being stuffed. This is a biological feedback loop that exists in every human body and is almost never used correctly in a modern Western meal. Wilcox validated that this single behavioral practice caused traditional Okinawan elders to consume 10 to 15% fewer calories than their metabolic maintenance required, not through hunger, not through discipline, but through timing. That caloric reduction activated what researchers now understand as longevity pathways, reduced mTOR signaling, which promotes autophagy, the body's cellular cleaning process, and it activated the FOXO3 gene, a master regulator of aging and stress resistance, and preserved the insulin IGF-1 signaling pathway that determines how gracefully your cells handle glucose for the rest of your life. The wellness industry's version of this is semaglutide, a pharmaceutical that forces appetite suppression by mimicking a satiety hormone. It outsources the biological feedback loop to a molecule, and when you stop taking it, the mechanism you never built is still absent. Hara hachibu is a practice. You cannot buy it, you can only do it. At 30 days, Goya champuru several times a week, Beni Imo replacing higher glycemic starches, and Hara hachibu before every meal. The markers to check are fasting blood glucose, HbA1c, and fasting insulin. HbA1c takes 90 days to fully shift because it measures the average lifespan of a red blood cell. But fasting insulin and fasting glucose will begin to move before that. The 2 p.m. crash you have been living with will likely be gone by week 2. That afternoon drop, the one that sent you looking for coffee. That is what this is for. One thing to do today, not 10. 1. Find one source of Goya, an Asian market, an Indian grocer where it is sold as Karela, an online order, and make Goya champuru once this week, not every day. Once. See if you can taste past the bitterness to what is underneath it. Ushi Okushima was 103 years old when Dan Buettner profiled her for National Geographic. She gardened for 3 hours every morning and met her moai, her social circle, for tea and conversation every afternoon. She lived to 109. She did not track her glucose. She did not take supplements. She ate what she grew and stopped when she was full. If you have noticed the 2 RPM drop before today, leave a comment below. I want to know how long it has been happening. Subscribe to Dear Obachan. Every week, one practice, one mechanism, one system, drawn from the longest lived people on earth.